Hey, I'm Magnus, and in this video I'm going to share some simple tips that you can use to determine if you're ready to give up alcohol or not. But the one thing I want you to keep in mind as we are going through this video, then there is actually only one person who can truly know if you should give up alcohol and if you're ready for it or not, and that is you. There is nothing anyone can say or do to really change your mind. Like, this is something that has to come from your heart and your own feelings. And how you determine that is really quite simple, because you really only need to ask yourself one question. It's like, how tired are you of alcohol really? And have you been through enough pain that you actually think that enough is enough? And in my so-called drinking career, then that changed like pretty drastically for me. Like in my early 20s and that type of thing, when I started to drink, then it was a lot of fun and I really liked going out, and yeah, it gave me a lot of, I guess, value back then for who I was as a person. But in my early 30s, then now everything has changed. Like, I have always been very hungover and always had to lay all next day in bed and that type of thing. But in my late 20s and early 30s, then it started to affect me so bad mentally that every single time I drank, then I had fun for about 4 hours, or at least I felt better for about 4 hours, and then I would feel bad for 5 days. And that included like severe depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, numbness, and just being in a, pretty much in a dark cloud for 5 days, and nothing I did made me feel any better. So all of a sudden, then it was this immense pain associated with drinking that wasn't there before. And this, like going through this every single time, it made me so incredibly tired of it. And then one moment came when, I was just so tired of being heavily depressed and suicidal like every single day that I almost took my own life. And I realized that the only way I'm going to become truly happy is if I get help overcoming this. And ayahuasca arrived precisely at the right time and got me out of it. And I'm just so happy and grateful for that. But it came when I was just so fed up with being a slave to the poison that I couldn't take it anymore. Like, I was just so done with it. And I realized what a slave to the poison I was, that I was never in control over it, even though that voice inside my head was telling me the opposite and always like influencing me to drink and making it sound like it was like a brilliant idea that always solved all of my problems, when in fact it was always the opposite. And in order to finally liberate yourself from alcohol, like for good, then you need to be so fucking fed up with it that you can't stand to have it in your life anymore. And that's when someone can help you get through it. I had to go through an enormous amount of pain before I reached the point where I was ready to give it up. And looking at it like from the outside, like my friends and my family members, they could clearly see how much I was suffering each and every time I drank and how I could continue making that trade. And I always thought of my hangovers as something bad and I hated them. I thought it was unfair back when I was drinking. But now, ultimately, they proved to be a blessing, because that was one of the biggest driving factors that forced me out from alcohol, because I just couldn't continue making that trade of 4 hours of buzz, of 5 days of severe depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and numbness. It was getting too much, even for me. Now, the hangovers here back in the day, or they've always been bad, but the biggest driving factor that eventually drove me out of alcohol is that I started to get so sick of myself and who I was as a person. And I hated myself every time I drank, because I knew deep down that I wasn't supposed to do it, that it wasn't good for me. And I kept falling short of my goals, like being fat and out of shape and feeling like crap and unhappy and depressed all the time. And every single time I drank, I had to spend the whole day in bed, like unable to move, and I ate like crappy fast food all the time. And like this behavior, it's like every time it happened, I started to get these more frequent thoughts like, Magnus, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like, it started to crush my soul, because I knew I could be doing so much better and that I had another life to live. And I started to hate myself because I wasn't doing it and I wasn't living up to my potential. And these thoughts, I couldn't ignore them eventually. Like, we all know deep down what we're supposed to do. The hard part is getting down and actually doing it. And it's so much freaking harder when you're stuck in alcohol and you have that voice inside your head who's always convincing you that drinking is the best idea that you could possibly do, when you know deep down that it is not. But that's the thing, like, we're all different and we all have different threshold of how much we can take, and our life situation might be different, and our values. You might have kids that are affected from our drinking, or you might be single, and that type of thing. So it's never a case-by-case basis. And now I'm going to read to you a short little story from a guy who messaged me a while back, and you would think that someone in this situation and that has been through this amount of just enormous amount of pain, that he would be ready to actually quit drinking. But that is not always the case, because it has to come from within, and until a person is ready to get help, then there is nothing anyone can do for them. Sorry to tell you everything, but it's best I give you a brief rundown. So drinking has been a problem growing up. It started at the possible age of 15 every weekend. It got to the point about 5 years ago, I was drinking every day at work. I was very functional. I was drinking at least 1.25 of liters of vodka per day. It got to the point where just before my holiday overseas, I had a seizure in the Sydney International Airport 2 hours before my flight. After I not long relapsed, did 3 months rehab and was sober for 6 months. I was feeling great, so I thought it was a good idea to celebrate. After this relapse, I went down quickly. I ended up in hospital for 3 months with necrotizing pancreatitis, in a coma for 2 weeks, ICU for 5 and 3 months of lying on my back with no escape. I had to learn how to walk again, and while out from hospital with a tube on each side of my abdomen and all the painkillers, I relapsed once again. I'm still shocked how this happened. After a while, I went to Odyssey House and spent 1 year there, and it sounds weird, but it's the best time of my life. 1 to 2 weeks after being sober for a year, I relapsed again and have been on and off drinking since. At the moment, I'm drinking about 4+ bottles of wine per day. I have refused to drink spirits, which really ruined me, but I know I need to stop. It's just really hard. I have a high tolerance, which is also dangerous. Anyway, that's just a brief rundown of what I'm going through. Sorry for the extremely long message. Rehab and detox obviously haven't worked. Well, it has to some extent, but I need another way to try and beat this, or I'm a dead man. You'd think that a person who has been through all of this pain would be ready to accept help and be willing to do what it takes to get control of their drinking. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. He hadn't had enough yet. And until, when, or if he reaches that point, then there is absolutely nothing anyone can do for him. Like, you can't rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued. And I even offered to help him for free. But this has absolutely nothing to do with money, because that's the equivalent of me moving this door like closer to him so he can step through it, when in fact he is the one who needs to want to take the step. And until that point, then yeah, as I've said, then there is absolutely nothing anyone can do for him. So in your case, then you need to ask yourself like the pros and cons of alcohol and what it's really giving and taking from you. Like the unfulfilled dreams, maybe not getting in shape, maybe like waking up with a hangover, like not being able to sleep, maybe affecting your kids badly, and that type of thing. Like, is it worth it and the price you're paying for it? That's basically what it comes down to. And perhaps now you think that you're actually okay with paying this price for drinking the poison, then by all means, keep being you and do whatever feels right. And if you in the future change your mind and you're so freaking fed up with it that you've just had enough, then I'm going to be here waiting for you. And my door is always going to be open. Like, alcohol is not something that you're going to miss, because you're going to find that there's a whole world out there that you have never explored, which is full of sober, happy people. And it's like you can have fun activities without poisoning yourself. Like, you don't need any fucking hangovers anymore and that type of thing. And just like, it's a whole better life, and you're not going to miss what you have when you give up alcohol. It's going to be the best decision you've ever made. But until then, and you feel ready, like deeply ready in your heart, then by all means continue to drink, and have a drink for me as well.